So here we are. We've reached the end of our Disability Newsroom, the first one here at the Dot Media Centre in partnership with Sarah Reilly, the Research Director for the Women's Research Centre. So happy with how it's gone, Sarah?
Yeah, it's been great. It's just great to be having like the different conversations about many different things that kind of impact the sort of lives of people with disabilities as well. And obviously we've done it from the professional side of things all the way through to the personal side. So I think we've had a really interesting people on today.
Yeah, I mean, our interview we did a couple of days ago in preparation for today with Molly O'Brien was really insightful, because it was that kind of lived experience of someone with a visual and a hearing impairment, talking very personally. Obviously, someone who works, you know what I mean? Sort of very active. We discovered very sporty as well, didn't we? Engaging with the world, and we're still having conversations in 2020 about accessibility issues and people not understanding certain conditions and stuff. I'm trying to understand why those barriers are still there, really. What's your view from talking to Molly?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. We've just put the posters up on the Women's Research Centre Facebook page. One of them is specifically about BSL and, you know, we communicate in a different language, so why aren't there more people who can understand sign language? And I think, you know, that's from the 90s and we're still having these conversations. And in fact, now we've regressed in some ways, because I know we talked the other day about how the COVID news press conferences that happen every day, the Westminster ones don't have a BSL signer. And I think that's kind of how we're still having these conversations sort of 25 years after the sort of the DDA came out, and they're definitely as relevant now as they've always been.
Yeah. And then we moved on to Hannah, obviously, who's Hannah Webber, who's the Disability Sport Officer at the University of Nottingham. Again, another really insightful conversation with someone who's coming at it from a real position of passion about disability sport and making sure that students are able to access that. And again, a very similar conversation about access to sport. 10 years after or 8 years, should I say, after the Paralympics and the Olympics, and we're still having that conversation about the value of sport for people that have a whole range of disabilities, but we kind of focus on why it's good for them with their disability, as opposed to the fact that they should be able to just do sports and leisure activities and all that sort of stuff, just like the normal people should be able to access it. Why is it even an issue? Why is it even a funding issue for inclusion and people to be able to access it?
Yeah, I think that inclusivity side is really important. Plus, it's like also having the facilities in place through kind of bodies that have the finances to do so, such as the university. You know, Hannah said they're very lucky to have, 16 sports wheelchairs. And I suppose then once people move on, or if people don't go to university, how can they kind of access sport? And I know that a lot of the work she does isn't just based on the physical aspects of being able to partake in sport, but also the other aspects that are important, such as mental health, both the positive impact it can have on your mental health, as well as being something that we also need to consider that it's kind of good for you to do the sport as well, from that perspective. So there's kind of quite a few things you can think of there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really impressive, wasn't it, listening to her talk about that kind of holistic approach, where it wasn't just a buddy for you to train within the gym. It was the fact that someone would meet you at reception, and you know, so there was that kind of friendship, companionship side of it as well. Those kind of positive mental health, well-being aspects to participating in sport, which we tend to forget about. It's very much about being social and part of something, or belonging, or, you know, talking to other people. And of course, COVID's really challenged that, isn't it? It's not just people going to be able to exercise. It's the fact that if you're really sporty, then that's your social activity as much as anything else, isn't it?
No, I think that's definitely true. And I think it's not just the kind of having somebody there physically to help you on and off the equipment. It is kind of, as you said, that social side of just that moral support, maybe sometimes just to be able to do the sport, or if you're used to doing a more team activity such as like wheelchair basketball or goalball even. I mean, how do you kind of sort of factor in the aspects of COVID and the sort of the distance rules and such forth? And, you know, if you can't have that social interaction, what have you got instead of that, really? And it's it's definitely, I think 2021 will be interesting to see with the vaccine how that progresses and changes, and at what level, really.
Yeah, not just the return, but actually the direction that certain things take, I guess, as well, isn't it? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then finally we finished with Tiffany. I mean, what a conversation that was. Dr.
Yeah.
Tiffany Webster, the service manager for the autism, was it autism information
And advice. Yeah.
advice? Yeah. I mean, amazing talking to her. Almost, I'm sure she does, but she almost didn't realise some of the things that she was saying was just like, wow, that's just sounds like another piece of best practice, and they've only been going for less than a year. But again, we came across, didn't we, that support from the commissioners all the way down through people all pulling together in order to make sure that people that have autism are accessed all of these services and are not left behind. And that reminds me of Hannah's conversation saying that at Nottingham, University of Nottingham, it was from the Vice Chancellor all the way down, understanding the value of inclusion through disability sport. It was really, it was inspiring, but also quite shocking to think that I'd heard so many other stories that were nothing like that, that is really good practice. How does that get shared? And I was kind of quite delighted that she was also a PhD, a researcher as well, and maybe she would share some of that content with other people that would get in touch with her. But yeah, really inspiring person to speak to.
No, yeah, definitely, and it's also the way the service isn't just for, as you said, just for people with autism or their carers or sort of family members or something. It's also them engaging with the sort of local authority bodies or other businesses and organizations and sort of trying to change the actual foundations of something rather than trying to sort of, for example, sort something after something's happened, or it's just that kind of, or just to help the individual person adapt themselves to that service rather than actually the service itself being more inclusive of people who are neurodiverse. And that was very interesting. And I think, again, like obviously once they hit they've got his plan for 2021 as well, it'll be interesting to see how they develop and how they move further within the East Midlands and within the different boundaries in Derby and Derbyshire as well. So definitely that'll be an organisation to watch.
Yeah, I mean, wow, their ability to collaborate with people and willingness to do that as well. I think anybody who's maybe watching this and go off and watch that, particularly if you're interested in a career working in that field or that sector, there's a lot to be learned. And they were saying a lot of free resources as well that was available for people to access outside the area as well. That they
their website is very good. I think we're going to be putting a link up, and it has like free services, free sort of documents you can download, or places you can sort of self-refer to and everything, or just, and it kind of starts from the basis. It explains autism as well as kind of, so it kind of caters to lots of people. It's not at all levels really, not just the professionals and such forth.
Yeah. We also spoke the other day about the Disability Discrimination Act, sort of 25 years ago, and the Paralympics 8 years ago. And this evening, I think you're going to go to another event. It's obviously International Day. Everybody's holding an event with DPAC talking about funding and all that kind of stuff. And they're celebrating their 10 years. Whether they will say celebrate, maybe commemorate, marking. Acknowledging 10 years since the coalition government kind of seemed to go on the attack really with vulnerable people, particularly those with disability. Do you think we're making any progress?
Are we making any progress? Well, that's
not
question.
A yes or no answer.
Exactly. It's I don't know, things have definitely kind of changed a lot kind of in the last sort of since the DDA. I think some people have felt, did we kind of reach that pinnacle, and then it's like, oh yeah, job done, let's move on to the next thing or something, when actually a lot of the kind of death by 1,000 cuts I think a lot of services have had, a lot of sort of things that have been put into place, and I think COVID's really kind of highlighted those sort of gaps in service, and also just how kind of disabled people are perceived and everything. But the actual kind of the event tonight for DPAC is called Staying Strong and Proud, and it's celebrating deaf and disabled people's resistance. And I think that's kind of a core part of it, because the big mantra in a lot of disability sort of rights organisations is nothing about us without us. And I think sometimes decisions are kind of imposed on disabled people without the consultation of them. And I think what's happened, and during COVID, that's also been the case. Like a lot of services have been withdrawn without kind of actually sort of thinking of the impact on the person, and all the Care Act, as we sort of mentioned before, certain aspects of that have been suspended. So I think these issues are still as relevant today as what they're always going to be. And I'm sure if we do a similar discussion in 10, 25 years time, we'll still be talking about similar things, sadly.
Yeah. So again, is it as much about making slight progress in many areas, kind of moving forward and championing good work, like best practice, like, you know, Tiffany was talking about up there in Derby and Derbyshire, as well as maybe an educational approach, you know, sort of more stuff in primary schools, talking about inclusivity and access for all and stuff like that, with more awareness when it comes to, we were talking with Tiffany as well, weren't we, about popular culture, about the role that soaps play, like EastEnders and those kind of things, in bringing in actors as well that have those conditions, and those conditions are part of everyday life. Because, you know, I'm not being funny, but being an EastEnder myself, that you'd think, well, if you were going to have a square that was representing somewhere in the East End, it should be diverse, inclusive, and that's not just skin color, but, or, you know, gender, or sexuality. That's also people with different kind of health conditions and stuff like that, isn't it? Different abilities and disabilities.
Yeah, what was it, like 1 in 20 or 22 people have a disability, and but if you ask 1 in 20, if you ask 22 people, I suppose some people almost like it's the label of disability. I think a lot of people really push against, and I don't know if that's just because of kind of society's kind of negative perception of disability, when actually you know, it does have like many interesting characteristics, and it's not necessarily a negative thing at all. But yeah, I think the kind of the way sort of television and other sort of films sort of represent disabled people is really interesting. Obviously we've had recently in The Crown, like there was a storyline about one of the two of the Queen's cousins having learning difficulties and disabilities, and how they were effectively hidden, which was kind of quite interesting. But I know there's been a rise in the number of people, as we were talking the day about, who are having to sort of live in residential care. There was a big drive for kind of living within the community, and then with austerity, a lot of the things such as the independent living fund which were put into place were abolished, and now you're kind of seeing people now having to move back into kind of more kind of care home type environments, or young people in old people's homes, because it's the only place where you can have the care. So, you know, but it's just sort of so many different levels. But yeah, as we were saying about sort of people with disabilities representing themselves in film, we were also talking about, because that was another aspect to do with the Crown. It's like there's a big campaign called "Don't Play Me, Pay Me," to try and encourage people who actually have the disabilities or learning difficulties to actually play kind of characters.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, there's plenty of work to do.
There's so many things. That's why we're flitting. It's just so many things that you need to highlight and bring up and stuff. We could just talk for hours and days, weeks.
Yeah, we can only do our bit, can't we? You know what I mean? Yeah. Encouraging everybody to do a little bit and have that conversation, I think, is great. So obviously, this is our first soft launch event for the Women's Research Centre, which is great. So now it's got a WordPress site, and obviously people can follow it on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Now we've got a Facebook page.
Yes.
What kind of people would you like to get in touch with you at the Women's Research Centre? Is it open to everybody to be able to get in touch with you? What sort of collaborations are you looking for?
I think we're just sort of looking for a wide range of people who are really passionate about a subject and just really kind of want to have a conversation about it, or kind of share their knowledge in relation to that area as well. We're not kind of just looking for, we say it's a research centre, but we're not just looking at people who are academics or something. It's practitioners. It's, as I said, something you're passionate about. It's a very, very open and inclusive space. So if people do have anything, please do get in touch, and we can kind of move from there. That'd be great.
Brilliant. So two final things. First of all, you created a resource list as well, which is on
Yes.
the website, which will be updated and amended over the next couple of days. So that's a kind of work in progress, so people can have a look at that, which is brilliant. And then finally, we're going to aim now towards the 8th of March, International Women's Day, for our formal launch of the Women's Research Centre. So we're kind of have a bit of a broader agenda that day. Today's been focused on disability, more of a broader agenda. Again, you know, what sort of things are you looking for? I mean, it's not women only. It's about, you know, women's issues, and everyone can contribute to that as well. You know, I mean, are we talking people with lived experience as well?
Yes, I think it's sort of just a wide range of issues and across society, I think, as well, because again, it's not our lived experience, and it is important that we actually talk to people who are directly impacted by such things. And, you know, we're open to other kind of people who are in other minority kind of identities as well. So yeah, definitely we need to kind of try and show that spectrum of people. And with disability, you always say that every person is different, and I think obviously you can stretch that across the board, really, with every woman's different, every girl is different. Just because you're not kind of an academic or something doesn't mean that your story shouldn't be out there, or you shouldn't talk about something. So I think as International Women's Day is kind of an international event, just those sort of different perspectives is really kind of what we're hoping to cover. So again, if anybody has an idea or a passion or just wants to kind of support us in any way, then please do get in touch.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I've enjoyed it. It's like I said, it's been great to work with you over the last couple of months, pulling all this stuff together. And we've Molly earlier in the week, which is great. And then today we've managed to get Hannah and Tiffany. Again, thanks to Tina Barton, who's one of the founders of the Women's Research Centre with you as well, who's our kind of education and engagement expert here at the Doc Media Centre. So she'll have a role to play, I'm sure, in International Women's Day, as well as our patron, Zimfia Ganeshkapan, from her Sri Lankan point of view, but also the work that she does around women's issues with things like poverty, criminal justice, and also domestic violence, which I can imagine we will be looking back and reflecting on.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, particularly in mind of COVID, where a lot of the kind of the domestic violence issues have really kind of been highlighted even further. So that's definitely something that we will be considering and exploring.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.